Hi, my name is Yarza Ong, and this is just my opening statement to say I saw the play on Sunday the 19th at 7 p.m. I stayed through the entire thing. I'm also completing this response entirely on my own. So, if I could sum up my reactions to the show in three words, I would first say I was really impressed by all the work the actors and designers did. I would say I'm really enlightened by the deeper themes of authority and also control that the show brings up. And also really excited to see more productions after coming to see this one. I did not think it would be as good as it was. So the creator and playwright's name is Jean Gennett, and I'd say her show falls into a dark comedy genre because even though a lot of the show is a little unserious and funny, it speaks to a lot of serious themes of illusion, authority, and even ego. So more about the conflict. I'd say obviously the protagonist has to be Madame Irma. She carries the weight of the brothels operations and is its core basically. And at some point she even plays the role of queen. So if that's not character development, I don't know what is. Um, as to a super objective, I think throughout the entire play, Madame Irma was trying to provide order and satisfaction, but not just for her customers of the brothel, but I think also for herself. I think this entire story actually comes to a climax when the entire cast is on stage, and Chantal basically gets killed off, like stage front and center, because so much of the story was building up to this point, and this was, I would actually say like it's more of an anti-climax rather than a climax, but I think it was done really well. It was a good twist that I personally enjoyed. Um, Regarding the language, it's really clear that the directing for the language was very 90s, but not just 90s. It was very high class, sounded very old money. I was reminded of like Cruella. And my second thought about language is that there's a lot of sarcastic and very dramatic tones written to character dialogue, especially with Irma, like the envoy, like they have very, very dramatic tones, which I think helps to fit into the image of and themes of power and privilege that the story really is talking about. Um, so onto the casting. I think the casting was pretty much perfect and worked really well together. And you could tell that the crew, not the crew, I guess like the ensemble was very practiced as a group. But what was most interesting was the gender diversity of the cast. The actor playing Carmen, I believe, is trans, and the judge's thief that was a man who was playing a woman. So definitely got diversity. And staging picture. The staging picture I want to talk about is the gathering of all the important characters. It was all the like the judge, the bishop, the general on stage, uh, the queen, and they all like gather on the balcony, and then Chantal like saunters on, and then she's shot dead. So the scene I'm thinking about is when Chantal's like on the ground, and then I vividly remember after she's shot, it's all the figureheads looking at the audience in a kind of shocked expression. It's like, and I think the reason why the stage picture was so effective was because of the dynamic of like tension and power. On one hand, we have uh, the queen and her crew who's on the side of like order, and then we have the rebellion. Like we had like Chantal's little troop, for example, on the other side of the play. I think it was a really tense stage picture that really stuck with me. Uh, and speaking of actors, I really want to talk about Adeline Miller, who plays Madame Irma. So Adeline really embodied Irma's haughtiness, her dramaticism, and her composure. The part of her performance that stuck out to me the most was her voice, and I talked a little bit more about like that 90s like high class accent. But anytime Irma talked, I was super captivated by her voice. It was very smooth, very high class. And also the way she would just interact with other characters could be so diverse, whether it was sarcastic banter with Carmen, or desperate intimacy with George, or kind of like accusing tones when it came to the bishop's group. And I also think Adeline does Irma's growth so much justice because she goes from the almost like tragic madam who has to run this balcony to someone who feels so much more powerful, assuming the role of queen, and someone who's fighting for the sake of society. I also want to say, like, throughout her performance, it kind of feels like Adeline always carried this, embodied like this understanding about the nature of people and the way that she kind of speaks to how people desire control. I feel like she carried that awareness in her acting. And one of her acting moments I want to talk about was her confrontation with Carmen. So this scene stuck out to me because of how well she played Irma's like unfiltered yet complex demeanor. And we see this on one hand, she's up in Carmen's face, like saying how her daughter is dead, and she's being so stern, so cruel, like almost like no mercy kind of taking like a no mercy kind of stance. And then a few minutes later, they're about to kiss. It's like more intimate, still tense, but still intimate. And I thought that was done really well. I remember that super vividly. The other acting moment is a little obvious, but I think the outro of the play, when Irma's talking to the audience and she's like, yeah, the play's done, guys. Her tone takes on a little bit more of a defeated take, and her body movements become more relaxed, which is why it really stuck out to me. Like, I was in shock because it really spoke to me that, oh, like the play's over. Like, she did so well there. So moving on from actors, I want to talk about Devon Painter, who's the costume designer. And immediately what I noticed was how abstract the costumes were. They were not traditional, but experimental, modern, and really seemed to cater to what seemed to be more like queer themes. The very first costume we see is the bishop's costume, and you would think that a bishop's costume would be more like holy and regal, but this one was pink, it was gold, it was, I think, a little bit see-through. And for me, it was like a shock because I was so confused by what I was seeing on stage, but that like really stuck with me. It was kind of an introduction to a more like a sexually suggestive setting. Like, I feel like that made a good first impression. And then I also want to talk about Irma's costume, and I think why it was done so well was mostly the wig. It was a really flashy, extravagant, and powerful wig, and I think the reason why the designer chose this is because it dramatizes Irma's growth from madam to being queen. It represents kind of like that authority and power. All right, so just to bring everything together, I really do think this play was done so excellently. And all the actors and designers did so well, not only to set a stage, but to create a story. And I thought it was really cohesive. And above all, I think that artists really wanted the audience to understand a hidden side of ourselves, that we all have some kind of innate desire for control, even if it's not in the scope of world domination. Like, we all maintain this ego. And I would say that my parting thought is that theater really does take a story and not only brings it to life, but it also takes these emotions, these themes and ideas, and kind of brings them to justice. And it also connects the audience to the actors on stage, but also to the production and the crew and others, even the playwright who are trying to tell this story. Thank you.